Hello, friends. Welcome back to the Strong Stoic Podcast. Today, I have the privilege of speaking with Kyle Smith. Now, Kyle is a clarity consultant who coaches people to live what I would call spiritual yet practical lives. Those are in my words. He's also the host of the Limitless Life Podcast. Now, we met sometime in 2023. He's actually a fellow Canadian who's originally from Eastern Canada, like myself, though he's living in Western Canada at the moment. And where I first appeared as a guest on his podcast, that's when we first met. And what I love about speaking with Kyle is his positive energy. He's a great conversationalist with an ability to really be present in the moment in a conversation, something that we could all strive to aim for. In this episode, we talk about what's holding people back from achieving their goals, the importance of competence, and the route to healing, miracles in life, and much more. I hope you enjoyed this conversation just as much as I did. So without further ado, please welcome Kyle Smith. What do you think, or what do you see as being the things that hold people back from achieving their goals or just generally improving their lives, or to put it in Epictetus's words, demanding the best for themselves?
The first thing that kind of popped up immediately that I think is the most prominent and that I've experienced the most is the emphasis people put on other people's appreciation and acceptance. So there is a limitation to growth when that growth is hindered by the ceilings other people have placed on us. And oftentimes those beliefs can be consciously or unconsciously adopted. So if one thing that I like using as an example of an adopted belief is if we are at the roller coaster and we feel the physiological response where it's like, ooh, oh my goodness, like palms are sweaty, knees weak, arms are heavy. What happens is someone else says to us, oh, you're experiencing fear, and it's okay to be afraid. However, it's the same physiological response as excitement. So then as we grow into our adolescence, then we grow in our teenage years, and then we grow into our young 20s years, then I find at least 30s, for myself at least, has been the trajectory where these beliefs have been, I've been a lot more willing to relieve myself of the expectation, or I like to put it where we are bound to the banners that we are obligated to defend the banners we are bound to. So if I am bound to the banner of this is fear rather than excitement, I have to defend that. So even if I feel excited to do something, I'm going to read into that as fear. And that's like, so that's one thing in a way that if we're not conscientious of the words that we're saying, then the words that we may have adopted either consciously or unconsciously from other people are going to be a principle that we're going to make decisions through. So I think one part would be how folks are still living in accordance to other people's expectations. And then another part that I would tack into that as well is when we're too busy thinking about what other people are thinking of, we're not taking the time to think about what we think of. So we're less likely to create a vision or a hypothetical situation that we want to experience in this lifetime. So if we have I like to think that we have a very small amount of cognitive resources that we can allocate to certain things. Similar to a bank account has X amount of resources within it that can be allocated to X amount of things. Our mind is no different, where we only have so much space. And if we're not mindful of where we're allocating those resources, then other people are going to allocate those resources for us. So then and how I think those two kind of things can be slowly pulled away. So I guess the tactical solution to that particular situation that I found is understanding that our own admiration and our own respect and our own confidence and our own competence ties into what we do and how we behave more so than what other people think we do and other people think of how we behave. So not giving ourselves the grace, I think grace is used a little bit more too often, but I think merciful is a little bit more tactical. So if we have mercy with ourselves rather than grace with ourselves, we're more likely to beat ourselves up. We're already in a state of, we have a negativity bias. We're already more likely to be negative. And that's okay because it would help us with survival. However, that can also work in a way of preventing us from progressing. So if we are able to be merciful with ourselves and practice mercy where we're not self-flagellating ourselves and being an asshole to ourselves, then we have the opportunity to remove bit by bit and create boundaries around the things that we want to do, and then give ourselves more mental space to be able to think of where we want to go. And from where we want to go, we then deconstruct the principles and the process steps or the inputs in order to get to where we want to go. So if we have an outcome that is a fixed outcome, and I'll use something that's simple where it's like lose 20 pounds. If an individual wants to lose 20 pounds and to make it more emphasized in 90 days or a particular date, then that's much more concrete. So that's the part that doesn't adjust. The outcome stays fixed because that's the desired outcome. But the things before it, the inputs and the principles and the activities can adjust accordingly. And when we have the awareness to understand what are the inputs or the seeds that we are sowing, because who we are now is a reflection of our past behaviors and past choices. Who we will be in the future is going to change the trajectory of that. And so if we only make the same decisions we've ever made, we're only going to ever get what we've always got. In order to get to where we want to go, we have to make better or decisions more in alignment with the person that we want to become. And so I think that when it comes to someone going from point A to point B, it's not just a matter of what is it that I get to do to get there. It's also the space in between the ears that are preventing the person from progressing, because we have that resistance. And that resistance is usually influenced by external parts, because in our intuitive self knows what we want. And I believe that if we are using that intuition or that gut feeling where it's like, you don't want to drink, but you drink a beer, that's out of alignment. And you're going to feel an intuitive, you're going to feel dis-ease. There's going to be a sense of ease that is not going to be there. There's going to be dis-ease. You're going to feel out of alignment. And that, in my mind, is a method of listening in a sense of just feeling. But that also creates more space, feeling into your body and using that as a North Star, because we know what we want. We also stop us from getting what we want. But when we can listen to our bodies and think, oh, you know what? I'm a little out of alignment because when I do this activity, I feel like crap because I know I want to do this or have this experience. And then it's just kind of listening to those points. And the way that I organize it as I'm tangenting along is when the head, the heart, and the intuition are in alignment, or the human being, the animal being, and the higher being are in alignment, then we find a state of energy neutrality. And that's been a huge one for this year for myself, where I'm like, energy neutrality is the way to go, because then you're creating, I think of it like Kendra and I were chatting about it on a date night once. And it's, you know how there's that idea where it's the snowball effect, where the snowball starts small and it builds momentum. But as it builds momentum, it gains mass. So is it that it's moving faster, or is it just accumulating more shit? So what is faster than creating more mass? Light speed, decreasing mass. So energy neutrality is taking and removing, and there's obviously like points to it. Like, I don't think that anything is ever 50-50. I think that there is always a 49-51 split between. Like, if we're making a decision, this is my rule of 41 or 49-51. It is, we're going to be 51% more inclined to option A compared to option B. Like, we're always a little bit more like, I prefer sour candies compared to sweet candies. And that's like that idea. But with the snowball effect, we switched it up to the light speed effect. So we're actually removing as much of that mass, as much of that stuff, as much of that non-functioning narrative or non-functioning opinions in order to make way for functioning opinions, things that we can say to ourselves and do, or say to ourselves that actually help us to get to where we want to go. So by decreasing the mass, eventually it doesn't turn into nothing, because there's not nothingness. That mass will get small enough that we actually start decreasing resistance and we move to our desired outcomes at light speed. So we don't need more stuff to build momentum. We need less stuff to hit light speed, kind of idea.
Yeah, I like that. What comes to mind in that regard is, I've had the realization that as you kind of move forward in life, we think a lot of times the opposite way. So we often think we have to add things, we have to do more, we have to get more. And I hear the first time I really realized this was actually in the gym, because I remember I was in a CrossFit gym and I was doing weightlifting, but one of the CrossFitters there was always talking about, what can I add to my program? What can I do more of? And we had a conversation about it. And through that, we came to the realization that yes, you have to add things from time to time, but really life, like training and life, it's about taking the stuff away that isn't useful. And by doing that, all of a sudden you open yourself up to potential. And it's really just about like shedding those layers. And so I like that. I like that snowball idea. And it's really been something that I've been thinking about lately, because I found myself this year layering on things so that I can quote quote be more productive. But what ends up happening is that I just create more noise and probably aiming to distract myself from things that I should be thinking about. So just a quick example, as opposed to always listening to a podcast when at the gym, maybe I should just be at the gym. Like what are you telling yourself intuitively if you overlap things? So if I'm talking to my mother on the phone while scrolling social media, or if I'm listening to a podcast while at the gym, it's like, am I telling myself, or do I believe that just talking to my mother, nothing else, that is enough? I don't need to layer on anything else. Or going to the gym, that's enough. I don't need to be listening to a podcast while I'm at the gym. Just being there is enough. So I like this idea of just shedding as opposed to accumulating. And in doing that, you free yourself from, to use your words, friction.
Absolutely. And if you think of it from like spiritual practices, the most enlightened individuals are the ones that have the least amount of worldly possessions. The people that have the most stuff, and of course there's like nuances to it, but I'm just going with like just like a full spectrum. That have the most stuff, or are focused on accumulation, have a little bit less enlightenment, because the stuff is more important than the growth. And I think that if we accumulate more, then we're just losing focus. And it's like, I also think of it in the aspect of what you said about distracting, where if you're 70% talking to your mom, there's 30% of you that's not there. And if that's also an indicator of not being present, and the only place that we can have any sort of control of is that present moment. And if our attention is split two ways, because the social media is going to be there after you're done talking to your mom, or after you're done at the gym, or after I'm done at the gym. So it's stacking things, which stacking is cool. Like an integration of activities is awesome, but it is definitely good to have that mindfulness of, am I having both feet in the ground? Am I accumulating things for the sake of accumulation? Am I removing things to just remove things? And I think even removing stuff, you could go through an aspect of awareness of why is it that I'm removing things as well. Because we can add or remove things accordingly, and both can be distractions, and both can be encouraging towards progress too.
Yeah, for sure. But, I like to think, I'm starting to think now that maybe like a singular focus is more the way to go, right? And, that's not to say that you can't overlap tasks. So for example, if you're driving to work in the morning, that's not a really inherently productive task. It's productive in the sense that you have to get to work to work. But, you can do that while listening to a podcast. But it's almost like, to your point, when you accumulate too much, you can't be present. And, the more I kind of think about Stoicism and Buddhism and all of this stuff is really nuanced and complicated. But it seems to me that really you got to learn to just enjoy what you're going through right now and just be here. And if you're layering on too many things, and to your point, if you're giving this task 70%, you can't give it 100%. And it's like going on a roller coaster and having your earphones in and talking to someone, right? It's like, why, like, you're here to enjoy the ride. Why are you distracting yourself with something else?
I like that. I just envision that too. Like someone on the phone. Yeah. How's the ride? Shut up. I'm on a call. What? I'm on a call. Yeah. Yeah. That's funny. I think a singularity of focus is definitely something that can create a lot more a refining existence. And because I was trying to think, I'm like, is there a singular focus? I think that if things are broken down, I kind of filter things through a mission statement. So if there's something that I'm doing is contributing to that overall mission statement, then I'm in alignment with that singular focus. But I know that mission statement or that principle, until I update it, which could happen too, it could always evolve. But as I go through my life, I believe that it's something that I'll be able to stick to, work as an extrinsic anchor, not just an intrinsic, but also external rather than just internal, like having the duality of both. So mine, for example, is the persistent pursuit of self-betterment and being a positive contribution to the human race, and to be a savage servant. So it's in embodying a bunch of dualities that I believe positively contribute to not just myself, but the larger whole. So I think of it like, okay, microverse, macroverse, independent, collective, singular human being, human beings, being, right? So I think having that singular part is legit, like freaking very helpful for me, at least. And then I think that a lot of folks may also find themselves trapping themselves in trying to put off doing activities until they find that singular thing, which is also delaying the process as a whole. And yeah, then you can actually go through a couple other sections on how to break that one down too. Yeah, it's an interesting one. It's good.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes I think we overthink in terms of what we should be doing right now. And I like your point about how you have to you have to kind of zoom in and out from time to time in your analysis and in your goal setting. And I was talking with a friend about this. Is he has his he's gone back to an old fashioned planner for his work schedule, and one of the things that he noticed was that in the old-fashioned planners, you'd have like a weekly overview. So at the start of every week, you'd have like a week. And then at the start of every month, you'd have a month. And so this is something that we miss in our online calendars now, is that, you get up and you look at your day, but like you don't really have an intention for that week or for that month or for that year necessarily. So yeah, it's a good point, to your point about the individual and then the community and then humanity as a whole. It's like, this is what makes this complicated, is you can't look at things through a single lens. It's like you have to periodically zoom out and zoom out and zoom out to get that bigger picture, not to the point that you're distracting yourself from doing what you need to do right now, but so that you can see the bigger picture and make sure that your actions right now are aligning with the greater whole. Hey there, Brandon here, and let me thank you for being a listener. If you enjoy the podcast, there are a few things you can do to help me out. A 5-star review on Spotify or wherever you're listening to this really does help, and it's free. You can also join my Substack free or premium subscription, each with different benefits. Substack free gets you the podcast emailed directly to you, along with some articles. Substack Premium supporters get access to full episodes of Paradoxically Speaking, a podcast with my good friend Joshua Bertolotti from In Search of Wisdom. My Steps to Success interview series is also on the Substack Premium, as well as an additional article every 2 weeks breaking down a Stoic quote. I appreciate any support you can offer, but if you cannot, for whatever reason, afford a premium subscription, I will happily grant you one for free, no questions asked. Just email me at thestrongstoic@gmail.com. I remember the last conversation we had. I was on your podcast, and I don't know what that was now. Probably, that's got to be getting on a year, 8 to 10 months or something like that.
Probably. It was sunny and bright out. It was warm. I'll tell you that much.
It wasn't freezing. But one of the things that I don't think we got into as much as I'd like to, but you were talking about human consciousness, and maybe this is a good segue into this. Like, how do you think about that? Because clearly, like, you obviously have somewhat of the Stoic viewpoint in terms of the cosmopolitan view, where we're all connected at multi levels of analysis. But like, I think you have the word consciousness in your Instagram bio too. So I think it's a word that you've thought a lot about. So what would you say in that regard? Like, what does it mean, and how can we think about that?
I think of consciousness as the thing that is subjectively individual. So I'm going to go with a couple layers on this one. From the same point in time, we were all birthed, no matter what someone's particular belief is or theory is, to the beginning of existence. The only thing that we know for certain is that we exist. And the material that we are made of is all the same. And it's the same material as the ever-expanding universe. It has oxygen, it has carbon, and there's, I think there's 3 main ones that I don't have off the top of my head, but we're all made up of the same material, right? Even if we can visually see all these differentiating factors from years, decades, unfathomable amount of time that has gone into our biological evolution for a variety of different reasons. When it comes down to the very microverse, the very essence of who we are, we have the same materials. Then that goes into, okay, so that's our physical being. That is this reality, right? What separates us is our consciousness. So if you look at animals, they all have the same, whatever the animal kind of grouping is, they all have the same kind of premise of function. While we as humans have that higher level of thinking, and we can create, we can converse, we can challenge ourselves, we can agree with ourselves or each other, and then we're able to expand ideas from that point. So I look at consciousness as the thing that truly separates human beings from one another. I also think of consciousness as being something that could be tethered to another reality or another kind of thought process, where an idea that can come up, and I think most people would be able to relate to this, where they think of, oh my, that'd be a great idea for a business, I'm going to do it, but then they don't. And I like how Rick Rubin puts it, where that idea came to you, you didn't take action on it. So that was the first time that idea wanted to come into manifestation. The second time that idea wanted to come into manifestation, it was another person that actually did the thing. And then you hear people saying, I had that idea. They stole my idea. No. You have nothing to show for your idea. So nobody but you knew you had the idea. So how is it that two individuals from completely different areas, or there was this one time where I thought this one was interesting. I forget when the date was, but there was 5 people that were in the US, or at least North America. They could have been in the same city, but they all came up with the exact same business model, and all of them crushed it. So they had multiple people with the exact same idea in different places that came about doing it. And I think it was something that contributed to the rest of the people, like the community and then human beings as a collective. And in my mind, if that many people had that many ideas in a cosmic coincidence, because I think coincidences do exist, but I think that there is also a stacking of things that had to happen in advance of that coincidence to happen. So luck is when preparation and opportunity meet. So is it luck or coincidence if someone or a bunch of people came up with the same idea at the same point in time? Perhaps. But like Steve Jobs says, you can only connect the dots looking backwards, not forwards. And if you go back on the dots far enough, then you're going to find common denominators. So I think that consciousness is connected to something that is from a plane of existence that is ideas orientated, because we're creationists. We're able to create. We're able, like what we're talking on right now and what we're doing are aspects of our creativity. These are thoughts that people have thought before, but we're just articulating it in our own amalgamated way. Kind of similar to Vincent van Gogh having his style of portrait, but he also has a huge influence from Japanese art. That's why you see a lot of flow in his artwork, but he's Dutch. So we're just taking ideas, amalgamating them, and then putting our own subjective twist. So with that idea of consciousness being possibly tethered to that main kind of common denominator of creation, I would define consciousness as the closest thing to, not a closest thing, I would consider it another name for a soul. So if a soul is what separates individuals in whatever the belief is, then consciousness can work in the same thing, kind of similar to source or the universe, or for some folks, God. And then that part I kind of break it down, where consciousness being our internal world's universe. So your body is a universe, my body is a universe, everyone else's body is a universe. And this is just how I visualize it, just because it makes the most sense to me. Also, a couple mushroom trips definitely helped out with this one. But if we go with that idea of the microverse, macroverse, right? And our body is within a universe. It's like those wooden dolls that you open up a doll and then there's another doll inside of it, and then you open up another one and you go from there. So there's a bunch of organisms within us, like in our gut microbiome, for example. There's a whole bunch of stuff that's defending. Like our gut microbiome is the first line of defense from things that we consume from the external world. It's heavily fortified. There's a whole bunch of little creatures in there that's working towards the survivability of the entity, the universe that it lives within. There's a job for it. So then we can think of it as like, okay, so if those little organisms are working day in and day out to survive within the universe, quote unquote, the body, then that would make the consciousness or our mind or our spirit the quote unquote God of that universe. And that's when I believe the power of decision comes in, where we can choose to be benevolent or malevolent. And our universe, our body, is going to reap the rewards, or in either case, it's going to reap what we sow. Whether we're planting good seeds or shit seeds, we're going to get whatever we sow. And our power of choice is going to be what's influencing that. So it's like, do you want to be an asshole to yourself? No, then don't be an asshole to yourself.
Yeah, that's very cool. Yeah, I think a good way to understand this, 'cause I get your point there, where we don't think about zooming in and out enough. And you can even think about this biologically, as you said, where you can zoom in on your individual cells, and each cell you have, and you have trillions, each cell is its own body. And so here's what's interesting.
Yeah, that's good.
I've started to realize that identity is such a weird thing, that we think it's simple, like we think we know who we are. But if you imagine, like, you and I right now, we have cells in our body that are just dying.
Mm-hmm.
They're just dying. Now, to that cell, it's probably an existential crisis, right?
Yeah.
Right. So he's dying, but we don't give a shit. Like, I don't care at all that one of my cells is dying, because it's going to be replaced by something else, and me as the greater whole gets to move on. Yeah. And as sort of hard, it's a hard truth, but that's kind of what we are in the universe. Like, a lot of these wisdom traditions will say we're all just specks of dust in the greater whole, and we have this little expanse of time. Now, that doesn't mean we're unimportant, because the cell that just died in my hand, that cell was important, and it contributed to my well-being and my fulfillment. So it's vital. But I'm not crying because one little cell died, in the same way that in the greater expanse of humanity, the cosmos, as the Stoics would put it, it's like nature, just things come and go, and that's okay. And it doesn't mean it's unimportant, but it is humbling to recognize how insignificant we are in the greater whole, yet how significant we are to the greater whole.
Actually, it's funny you say that. I was chatting with a buddy of mine, Jesse, also one of my favorite conversationalists. I have like legit a list of peeps where I'm like, they're my conversationalists. Because I view myself as a catalyst character. I'm a good conversationalist too, but as a catalyst character. And so I have, I kind of organize peeps in a sense of gameplay, where it's like archetypes. And it's always a treat chatting with you, because you're a conversationalist. So then it's like, it's like creating a cool little spot of being able to challenge my own thoughts, and then also add on more effective aspects to it. So it's good. That was just a side tangent about you, brother. But I had my buddy Jesse ask me, and it was while he was going through a tough time. And he asked, what do you think is the meaning to life? And I was like, ooh, this is a good question. And my answer is that, and I can give more context into the ideas of why I think this, or for dualities at least, I'll tie in. So my answer to him was, life is both meaningful and meaningless at the same time. So presence, in my opinion, is energy neutrality. It is neither positive nor negative. It is neither past nor future. And the day itself can be neutral the more like dialed in we get. And the way that I like to think of it is, energy neutrality is the embodiment of dualities. So we are neither one nor the other. We are both and. And so I think of it going with the idea of making this example of in the zooming out and zooming in, is that if we zoom out to the macrocosm, then to your point, we're just those DNA cells that are just crying and dying. But then if we zoom in enough, the chances of any human being existing is 400 trillion to 1. So in my mind, that makes it also inherently beautiful because it is such a statistical anomaly where everyone is technically a glitch in the whole, in this gameplay, because it makes sense for planets to be around, right? There's a bunch of planets, there's a bunch of stars, and there's stars, and then it goes planets, and then it gets smaller and smaller and smaller. And so for us to exist at 400 trillion to 1, where your parents or actually, we're both from the East Coast. So statistically speaking, like, I don't know, that's pretty cool. And we didn't even meet in the East Coast. So that's pretty cool.
We're cousins, probably.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, probably. So if we think of our parents being 5 minutes off in either direction, neither of us would exist. So life is both meaningful and meaningless at the same time. However, where I think it becomes important is the meaning that people put on today. That's going to be the spot where there's energy neutrality. So we can put meaning on the past, but realistically, and this might be a little bit of a toss up on this one, but realistically, whatever we think of in the past and we bring into the present, we're just fantasizing about. And I would say that, and it would probably be, and not controversial, but I would say that I would define trauma, for example, as an opportunity for accelerated learning. If a trauma experience is still impacting people decades later, then there may be the possibility that they just haven't learned the lesson that trauma was imparting. And that goes for a lot of dark, different ideas. And I'm totally cool with like backlash on that one. But I think of the experience that I had, and then you can have 100 people experience the exact same thing, and you'll have 100 different timelines from that point in time. And I think that the way that we bring things from the past into the present, we can do the same thing where we pull it from the future and pull it into the present. So we can envision the person that we wish to be, create that character, and I call it the role model in this one. And then there's the rival. The rival is usually based off of past experiences that are preventing progress rather than encouraging progress. But if I'm envisioning my inner role model that I call the dapper dude, then I can think of the characteristics, behaviors, traits, how that person would dress, how that person would feel in this situation, how they would hold themselves to this kind of standard. And I can pull that into the present and experience what that's like, rather than pulling a past experience of me being in a car accident, like a really savage one when I was 18 years old, and pulling that to the present. I can do it in the same in either direction. So the meaning that we have in the present is defined by the choices we make. I choose to make this an abundant day. I choose to make this a scarcity day, because people do not behave. No, nothing causes a person's behavior. It can only inspire, whether it's a positive or a negative, like a net positive or a net negative. Nothing can cause us, unless it's like a bullet to your, like, unless it's a gun to your head and you're like, maybe I should do this, unless, you can go with the alternative, which, you know what? That's legit too. I believe Epictetus, he was like, yeah, I'd rather like kick the bucket myself than get banished again, because him doing that was in alignment with his values. So he made, in his mind, a net positive decision because it was in alignment with the person that he envisioned of himself in the future. So So life is both meaningful and meaningless at the same time. However, the meaning that we give today is based off of the decision to do so.
Yeah.
And to think of life not meaningful and think of it as meaningless is still a decision to make.
Yeah, I like that. That's I might steal that for Paradoxically Speaking, a podcast with my friend, because we talk about paradoxes all the time. And that's a hell of a paradox. that life is both meaningful and meaningless. And I like the way Brett Weinstein, he's an evolutionary biologist. I like the way he put this. He said that we know that there's no meaning in life. So that's the meaninglessness. He said, we know that all the atoms are going to break down. Excuse me. We know that all the atoms are going to break down and eventually we'll all die. But he said, we also know just how crazy it is that we're all here to talk about the odds of you being alive. We know how beautiful the sunset is and the sunrise and how just crazy, how crazy nature is. Like all these miracles that happen, your own existence for one, the fact that the sun comes up, like honestly, this is stuff that you go through your day-to-day life and you never really realize it. But it's crazy. There's like a ball of fire in the sky. And what the hell is the sky anyway? Because you stare up at that at night and that looks completely different, right? Like all you see is these little lights coming in. And I guess his point was, he's like, yeah, it's meaningless, but it's also so meaningful if the environment is such that it allows you to have that experience. Because we also know what hell is like. We also know what hell is like on Earth. And so to talk about the meaning of life, and this is really stoic, it's let's try and create a world where as many people can experience the life that you and I at least partially experience, where, we're living in peace and we have meaning in our lives and we have people around us that we love and care about. And I think you hit it right on the head.
Something that's kind of cool with that too is going from so this is a cool visual because you just mentioned nature there too, but a cool visual that embodies the idea of the micro and the macro, the small, the cute, the large, like those ones, is the Fibonacci sequence. I had to Google it to make sure I got the name right, because I know it's not the Pythagoras one, but I always call it the Pythagoras one, and it ain't. But the Fibonacci sequence is 1 + 1. 1. So it's 1 1 2 1 1 2 3 1 1 2 3 5, and it continues to expand. And an example of it would be if you take a shell and you cut it in half, you'll be able to see the spiral. So that's in a seashell, right? Now, if you take that, it's also in a Tool song. But then if you pull back far enough, you can recognize the same pattern, the same spiral in a galaxy. So it's like it's interesting because who was it? Something that, Nikola Tesla said, if you want to understand the universe, understand frequency, vibration, and energy. I also think that if you toss in, which is really funny because in high school, I was like the quote unquote dumb kid. Like I was in the quote unquote dumb classes. Like shout out to all my ed heads out there. I did not do good in math. Did not think I would ever really have an emphasis on it or importance to it. But now as like an adult, I'm like, whoa, I think math is the language of the universe, because if you think of like the structure of the solar system, there's all these huge bodies. Like how is it that we're not getting hit by meteorites? It's because Jupiter is just large enough that it can actually take a brunt of all the things that's going on. So systematically, there's a system to this. There's a method to the madness, or the seemingly mad. Ooh, there's a method to the seemingly mad. I like that. That's cool. And it goes to the broader universe, how our solar system, because our solar system is not flat as well. It's not like it's rotating. It's actually trajectorying. It's going along with the trajectory of the universe. And you can actually see, there's a video that I've seen where there was like a tail. There's a tail that was attached to each of our celestial bodies that are within this solar system. And you can zoom on the side and it's like, oh, that looks freaking cool. Like it looks like a clock. It's like literally clockwork. And then when you look at the tail end, all of these tails of all these celestial bodies actually coil up into a rope, and they just tie together just perfectly. Like, well, I guess a rope would probably be the best example for that one. Like, if you think of like like a, like an actual, like, I don't know what the material would be, but yeah, a rope would be that one. And so it's interesting. So it's like mathematics and looking at numbers and how sequences tie in. It's a lot easier to see common denominators. It's a lot easier to understand polarities that way too. Yeah, that was just a tangent that I was like, oh, I want to share this fun fact.
Yeah, that's cool, man. No, I remember learning about the Fibonacci sequence. Yeah, you start with one. Well, I guess you technically you start with 0, and then 1, and then you go 0 plus 1 equals 1, and then 1 plus 1 equals 2. And yeah, that ratio, even like our frames, like the frames that we find visually appealing, all of that is a Fibonacci sequence. Even like in the stock market, which is, I've learned this very in the last few years. I've been kind of digging into technical analysis, and it's actually crazy that all those stock charts, it's all reflective of human psychology. That's what it is.
100%.
Like people just see lines and numbers, but like the more experienced you get with it, which I'm not, I'm a complete beginner. But what I do know is that you have, it's a representation of human psychology, and so you have these like Fibonacci numbers where you can project out, what the price will be if it does this, and that's really all it is. People are looking at the lines, looking at the patterns, and trying to map whether people think, all people think that price is going to go up or down, and then from that, so it's so fascinating. But to get to your point, or you use the example of a seashell, and the hidden, I would call it the hidden order amongst the chaos. And even like people don't associate this with Stoicism, but Marcus Aurelius, like he has lots of passages where he's looking at that very thing. He's looking at the patterns in the wood on his desk, and he's looking at the, like a candle as it's burning, and how the wax kind of falls down, right? And like, what's humbling about this for me is we can see some patterns. So we can look at the wood right now and see pattern. We can look at a maple leaf, a Canadian maple leaf, and see the pattern there. But we don't have the ability to see the bigger pattern as it relates to all of us human beings. And this is why I think as equally as important as it is for you to have direction in your life and go forward, you also have to accept that you're not seeing the bigger picture. And so you have to surrender to what fate or providence, however you want to term that, you have to surrender to whatever life puts you through, because there's just so much that's just not up to you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Another fun fact, I learned this literally yesterday on the Fibonacci sequence. All Aston Martin cars have the Fibonacci sequence within them, and that's why they're so beautiful.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. Literally yesterday, first time, or maybe the day before. It was the day before. It was Friday. But yeah, man. So that was just a nerdy thing. But I actually have a theory on this one. I shared it with someone who is an avid camper. I forget where I heard this too. I think it was no, it wasn't Cameron Hayes. Anyways, it was someone that was an avid outdoors person. And I totally agree with this, because we're in North America where there's a lot more cities. So we have less accessibility to the stars. We see less of the stars. And if you think of the folks back in the day where they had such an emphasis on stars, where everything was lined up to the equinoxes and things along those lines, and it's like, oh, look, it's Orion's belt, and those are going to be the North Star. Like, there was all these indicators of how we can use the sky as information, and it was also used as entertainment at that point because we didn't have the other stuff. And there's a theory, or there's a thought, I'm not sure if it's mine or someone else's, but the thought that we have lost touch of how small we are because we are desensitized by by observing the larger expanse of the universe. Because when you think about the times that you've gone camping, or you've just been in a spot that has the most amount of stars, or even if it's a scenario where I believe this happened in Los Angeles, where something happened where the power grid went out, and people saw stars for the first time, and they were freaking out because they never seen the Milky Way. So they're like, oh my gosh, it's an invasion. I don't know if they said that. I'm just elaborating it. But they did look up at the sky, and they're like in awe. And I think that awe factor humbles us. And I think because we are exposed to it less often, we are desensitized by the truth that we're really small. It's kind of crazy shit, man.
Dude,
And
there's I got to tell you this. There's this quote from. Have you read much of Emerson's work?
quotes for sure, and the odd video of him of a breakdown with his stuff. But I really like his stuff.
Yeah, I got to get you. Okay, so this is just
Write it
this.
down.
You'll love this because it really aligns with what you were just saying. If the stars should appear one night in 1,000 years, how would men believe and adore and preserve for many generations the remembrance of the city of God which had been shown? But every night come out these envoys of beauty and light the universe with their admonishing smile.
Whoa,
So it
that's
just go.
that's way prettier.
It's beautiful, right? I mean, Emerson had a
Yeah.
way with this, but like what an interesting thing, because I often think that the miracles that like we see miracles every day, but because we see them every day, we don't constitute them as miracles. But like to Emerson's point, like once every 1,000 years, can you imagine? So once every 1,000 years, like there'd be stories of like, oh my God, like the sky was just alight with lights and it was beautiful. Like God showed us the kingdom of heaven. And then, but no, we get to see them mostly every night. And it's like, oh yeah, those are just the stars.
Mm-hmm. Totally. I also think that ties into, so that's going from macro and then going to micro. So let's say the idea where 70% of our attention is put one place, and then rather than and 30% another. A thing that I've been really working on to counter uh, that, or that desensitization, is turning my day into a living meditation, or where I'm much more mindful of, like, here I am right now chatting with you, and I'm only speaking to you. And as I'm speaking to you, I'm thinking in my mind, wow, it is so amazing that we're able to be on opposite sides of the country. We're able to see each other. We're able to communicate with fucking great rad sound. The video is unreal. Like, it's not even that it's there. It's how pristine and miraculous this creation is. So it's having that childlike wonder in this present moment. And I think when we're too busy focusing on the things that are external of us, thinking of those opportunities or actually not even thinking of the opportunities to experience awe. Like, I think awe is in choice. It's not going to the Niagara Falls, not going to Machu Picchu. It's not just going to places. It's also right here in this moment. And it's similar to, and one thing that I've actually learned from this practice, this has been a focus this year, is that my days have gotten longer, but I've been able to get more into a flow state as well. So my work to rest ratio is creating a mental equilibrium that allows me to be more present while making progress, but also just experiencing so much gratitude in the persistent pursuit of self-betterment and being the positive contribution. And the thing that I found is that with this childlike wonder, every moment has become a novel experience. And I think that, when people talk about when they age and time seems to go faster, they're not experiencing novel experiences. They're not partaking in novel experiences, or they're not having a novel set in their mind. It's the same experience over and over and over again. So we blink and then it's like, whoa, a week left. So then if you think of it that way, where there's 52 weeks in a year and people are looking for the weekend, which is like 2.5 days, right? Or 2 days, I'll put it as 2 days. 2 days, that's 5 days that go by in the blink of an eye, and they're only living 2 days out of the week, which if you look at the year, that's only 3.5 months. So I would rather think of the day and then be mindful, meditative, do a little bit of progress. And then I also view today as today's preparation for tomorrow. So whatever I do today is going to prepare me for tomorrow, whether it's good or bad, like no matter what my inputs are. So then the mindfulness, if I'm practicing mindfulness today, it's going to carry over to tomorrow, along with the projects and the other activities that I'm going to do. And so I kind of think of it like it's how there's monk mode, where you cut out everything so you can focus on something all the time, like just slay it. I actually think of it more of a monk mentality. So I would describe myself as a capitalistic hippie, where I run a business. So I'm partaking in capitalism while also having this woo kind of vibe to myself, where I could easily go live out in the woods. And that's one of the things that Kendra and I are doing, is one of our visions, our shared vision, because we have independent visions, but we also have a shared vision, which I think that kind of ties back to folks and goals. Is they think, oh, I don't want to pursue this goal because of how it affects my significant other. While the two people, the partners, can also have a shared trajectory and two independent trajectories that have that connection. And I think that is something that is really helpful. But we're doing a camper van style. So we want to go camper vanning, and then we want to go around North America. So that time, but what I'm doing for work, where I'm mostly coaching online in performance, like just how someone performs on a day-to-day, that ties in with that duality. I forgot where I was going with that one, but like, yeah. So it's like a lot of fun to be able to have that tie-in, have that little loop-de-loop of things.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I totally forgot where I was going on that.
That's great though, man. There's I've never, it's interesting, the idea that if you use your day right, it will actually be long. Because I heard, I was watching this Tom Petty documentary shortly after he died, and he got asked this in an interview once, and it was a question where the guy was like, he was looking for a particular answer. So he asked something like, you guys have been in a band for 40 years. How does that feel? Did it feel like it went by fast? Like, did it feel like it just went by in a blink of an eye? And Petty just sort of like thinks, and he says, to be honest with you, it felt like a whole lot longer than 40 years.
Ooh.
Right? And that was like, that was such a wise response. But that's not what you hear. Usually you hear the opposite, right? Time goes fast. And then there's also that quote from Seneca, which is, life is long if you know how to use it. Mm-hmm. Right. So if you got your shit about you, life is long enough. It's long enough. Just getting near the end here. There's one question here I kind of want to end on, because you mentioned at the start, or near the start, about how you can sort of visualize who you're going to be going forward, or who you want to be. And this is a question that I ponder from time to time. And so I'm curious what your answer would be from this. What advice would you, at 65 years old, give yourself right now?
That's such a great question. That's good. It's also very similar to the question that I give too. So it's fun being on the receiving end. Yes, son of a bitch. Anyway,
it's a tough one, man. It's a tough question.
It is. So I actually have, okay. Say the question one more time. I want to make sure I answer the question before I tangent.
What would you, at 65 years old, tell yourself right now in terms of advice?
I'm going to breathe into this one. So if my 65-year-old self was giving me advice, because that 65-year-old self would be embodying the person that I have become, not the person I fear to be. I would make sure I would have that differentiator. Because I think if someone is reverse engineering from that point in time, from the future point, they may unconsciously understand that their present day behaviors are going to end up being the individual they don't want to be. And I would not want to take advice from someone that's not living the life that I don't want to live. So that would be the first differentiator. So it would be the best version of me at the age of 65. Yeah. I got a little visual of what that would look like. Okay. Yeah. I'm going to put context. I'm going to put a story to it because it'll make it a little bit tighter. So I'm visualizing it. I look at it like a storyboard, like I'm making a movie, directing it, hanging out with my 65-year-old self. He's got some swagger. He's got very Rick Rubin-esque. I think I'll be a little bit more in shape. I think I'm on a pretty good trajectory for that. I am on a trajectory for that. But we'd be chilling. Probably be on a stoop. We'd be smoking a joint. And he would look over, he'd be like, bro, lead with your heart. Keep your values high. Keep your standards high. That resistance is good. When you see that resistance, when you feel that resistance, just flow into it. But always trust your intentions. If you're ever in doubt, trust your intentions. If you got good intentions, then you're unstoppable. Then you're limitless. You can overcome any obstacle. You can alchemize any material. You can turn lead to gold. You can turn, and I think of lead to gold like spiritually. If I were thinking of it as a spiritual practice, you can have a lead spirit, but it can be turned to gold. Yeah, he would probably say, keep those relations, because you're never gonna feel. Keep those relations strong. Bring your heart to them, because you'll never feel as wealthy as a man abundant in love.
That's beautiful, man. That was really great. I know you really felt that question.
Fuck
so
yeah.
I appreciate that. I think you, yeah, that's a good lesson for those listening too, is just sometimes you just got to sit in the question and be open to what comes in. And that was really, really great. And some of that resonates with me as well. So Kyle, thank you so much for being here, man. Thanks for being present with me. Where would you send people that want to check out your work?
Pretty much anything that says Dapper Dude Kyle. So if it's Instagram, Dapper Dude Kyle. TikTok, Dapper Dude Kyle. YouTube, I don't think it's Dapper Dude Kyle, but I'm pretty sure if it pops up, you'd probably be able to find it there. Name's Kyle Smith. Yeah, I don't know. You can Google. You'll come up with a lot of Google searches on that one. That's a tough one. Let's see. That's pretty much the main places. Instagram, I get a lot of, would be the most prominent one. I think most people would go there anyways. But yeah, it's pretty cool. Oh, and then my podcast is also the Limitless Life Podcast, and that is on Apple, Spotify, also YouTube if you like video. And that's it for that one. Yeah.
Thanks, man. It's great chatting with you. You have this manner of being able to really be present, and one of the things I like most about you is you can just laugh, and you can really feel that, like you smile about stuff, and you're very present. And I think Dostoevsky had a quote similar to this. I'm going to butcher it, but it's something like you can tell you can tell who a person is just by their ability to laugh. And I think that ties in with what we were talking about in terms of just embracing both the meaning and the meaningless of life. So Kyle, thank you very much for being here again. And until next time.